We're going to go ahead and get started. The government, as all of you know, is shut down. 800,000 people are directly affected. Over 400,000 of them are working, but not getting paid. The shutdown is a negative, stupid, uncalled for, unnecessary, people-affecting process. Some years ago, Senator McConnell was asked, what do you think about shutdowns? Are you supportive of shutting down the government? His response was, of course not. I am the guy that gets us out of shutdowns. Shutdowns, it's a failed policy. Quote, Senator McConnell, August 28th, 2014, just a few short years ago. Today we have on the floor a number of bills. Tomorrow we'll have another bill, and tomorrow we'll have another bill after that. We will pass 4 bills that the Senate passed 96-2 to open up government, to have our federal employees performing the services for the American people that the American people want and need. Our region, of course, is heavily impacted by this shutdown. And today we stand together with my colleagues here, Representative Sarbanes, Representative Holmes-Norton, Representative Connolly, Representative Beyer, Representative Raskin, Representative Trone, Representative Wexton, and with our good friends, Secretary-Treasurer of the Federal AFGE, Everett Kelly, and President Randy Irwin of the National Federation of Federal Employees. Thank you all for being here, for standing up for the people who are working for us, people who are working for the federal government, people who are relied upon every day by millions and millions and millions of Americans. Because of this shutdown, SEC regulators can't protect retirees and investors. FDA food inspectors can't keep our products safe. Our national parks remain without visitor services, emergency rescues. Security lines at airports are longer, causing delays of travelers. The possibility is that people won't get their refund checks. Approximately $140 billion, average refund $2,500 that people are relying on and that spur our economy. People are worried about whether they can settle on a purchase of a home or a sale of their home. Flood insurance is at risk. This, as Senator McConnell said, is a failed policy. I call on Senator McConnell to pass these bills that his Senate has already passed 92-6. That will open up a substantial part of government. We still have more to do. Now, he has bills over there that would open all of government, but he's refused to put them on the floor. Not because he doesn't agree with them, but because the President of the United States apparently doesn't agree and wants to hold hostage not only the 800,000 federal employees, but the hundreds of millions of people who rely on them every day. I want to thank Representative Beyer for introducing legislation guaranteeing retroactive pay for those who have been furloughed or exempted, and which all of us here are proud to co-sponsor. An overwhelming round of applause have just been received. All of us in this regional delegation will continue to stand up and fight for our constituents who serve in the federal workforce. Mr. President, who's going to want to come to work for the federal government if they think from time to time they can, for reasons understandable to them, they are said, you come to work, you're a critical employee, but by the way, we're not going to pay you. Who wants to go to work for an institution that does that on a regular basis to its people? We are eroding the credibility of the federal government, and we are eroding ourselves as an employer of people who have great skills and served our people well. We're going to keep doing everything we can in our power to reopen the government so that they can get back to work, get the paychecks they earned, and perform the services for the American people that are critical for them. It is now my pleasure to introduce Eleanor Holmes Norton, the Congresswoman from the District of Columbia, who has a very big voice, great influence in the Congress of the United States, but tragically and very inappropriately does not have a vote. Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Hey, Eleanor. Thank you very much, Steny. And I want to thank my colleagues from the National Capital Region. But I want to say to all of you, make no mistake that somehow we represent only the employees who happen to live, a big clump of them, in the National Capital Region. Every member of the House of Representatives could be with us here today, because every member of the House of Representatives has members, has indeed constituents from every district who are out of work or on furlough today because of this extended shutdown. So we are here to represent all of those employees from across the United States. I do want to personify who these people are, because you keep using these figures. 800,000 is a very big number. This morning's post features just one of them. She's a shop steward of the SEIU. She's a grandmother. She has 11 grandchildren, 6 children. She's a security guard at the Smithsonian. These are who we're talking about. She, in a real sense, brings to life why we are here today. President went on the air yesterday, last night, to try to convince us that the government shutdown was not only worth it, but necessary. He failed. And to give you some indication of that, and the time is running out, that's why he went on the air. Because the American people, the polls show, already want their government open. He's trying to prop up the faltering shutdown and wall issue. The vice president was here in the House of Representatives just on Tuesday to try to hold together the Republican caucus, which is falling apart and falling in our direction, and speaking out about opening up the government, because they are hearing from their constituents just as we in the National Capital Region are hearing from ours. We are told that at least 25 representatives may vote with us on the bill that Steny mentioned to open up the government today. They're hearing from the American people, because it is not just employees. They matter to us particularly. It is services that these employees render. It's most important of all. The polls show that the American people want their government open for business as usual. I thank you, and I want to introduce now my good friends, Mr. Sarbanes of Maryland.
Thank you, Congresswoman Norton. I want to thank Congresswoman Norton for her bill, which would make sure that contractors are paid retroactively. I want to thank Don Beyer for his efforts on behalf of our federal employees. This is not just about making sure that we get people back to work. There's a lot of stress on federal workers because they know the job they need to do. And they know that that work is piling up. They're sitting at home. They're not getting paid. They know that the stack is getting taller and taller. If you're somebody who has to process these tax refunds, for Americans all across the country. You know that that work is going to be there. You want to be in your office doing the work. You want to be issuing those mortgage applications. You want to be issuing those permits. You want to be handling the tax refund requests because you have a sense of mission. All the federal employees that we represent, and each of us here today has tens of thousands of federal employees in our district. They are people that go to work every day when they're allowed to go to work to serve the American people. And they have a sense of mission. And it is offensive that this president, who is the leader of the organization, which is the executive branch of the United States government and owes a duty to those workers to let them do their job, that he's holding them hostage based on this idea of building a massive border wall. We need a leader. We don't need a demagogue in the White House. We need a president. We don't need a grandstander. And so, Mr. President, we beseech you, open the government. Democrats and Republicans alike have reached compromise on measures that can reopen the government today if the president would sign that bill. So we ask him to do that. Stop holding these federal employees hostage to unreasonable demands. Be the commander-in-chief, be the president, do your duty to the country, make sure that the services that these workers can provide to Americans all across the country are delivered starting tomorrow. I want to thank all of my colleagues for their representation of federal employees, and I want to thank those employees who are sitting at home today wanting to do their job for toughing it out. We're going to make sure you get your back pay. We're going to make sure that you're respected. That is our mission here as your representatives. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Jerry Connolly of Virginia. Jerry?
Thank you, John. Thank you. Thank you for being here in the midst of what is madness. Lest we forget, this president made it very clear early in his presidency that he believed in good government shutdowns. There is no such thing. It's a mentality he has about government and federal employees as pawns in a bigger game. Well, this is not a game. This is about the contract between the American people and their government. They pay taxes, and in return, they have a right to expect services uninterrupted. We talk because we represent a lot about federal employees. But we also have to talk about the American people who are being injured by this shutdown in a game Donald Trump created. A wall Mexico is supposed to pay for, suddenly we're supposed to pay for, and government has to stay shut down until it is. A wall we don't need, that is justified by racist, bigoted, nativist, xenophobic rhetoric we heard last night on television from the President of the United States. One of the most sordid moments in the history of the Oval Office. Mimicking alt-right bigotry as a justification for shutting down the government and insisting on a wall we don't need, we don't want, and that won't work. Let me just briefly list a lot of the federal services that are threatened for all of the American people. Public health. FDA can't take new regulatory applications. So new applications and new drugs suspended. Food assistance to low-income Americans. Jeopardizing nutrition for children and for people at risk. Small business assistance halted. Consumer protections halted. A lot of law enforcement activities affected or suspended, especially in cooperation. National parks, of course, we've seen the headlines about they're unsafe without being patrolled, and they're unclean because trash pickup has been suspended. Environmental inspections stopped. Vehicle safety activities suspended. Home buyers and rental services by HUD suspended. IRS consumer services suspended. These are just some of the services all Americans count on, and the ripple effect of that will continue to grow. There's a simple way out of this. Reopen government, and let's have negotiations about border security across the board with everything on the table. But we're not going to be held hostage, and we're not all going to be pawns in your partisan attempt to redeem what was a phony promise in the campaign to begin with. We're going to build a wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it. We're not on the hook for that. Neither are the American people. Thank you for coming today, and it now gives me great pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend from Virginia, Don Beyer.
Thank you, Jerry, very much. Last night, President Trump gave a speech from the Oval Office, and he talked about a crisis. And there is a crisis, but it's not the lack of a wall. Trump's government shutdown is a crisis, especially for the National Capital Region. I represent about 80,000 federal employees and thousands of federal contractors and the family members. They're getting crushed by Trump's shutdown. Trump said a lot of words last night, but not a single one of them was about the federal workforce. So I'm going to tell you what I'm hearing from them. Trump last night talked about a humanitarian crisis. Well, there's a humanitarian crisis that he created at the border, and there's another one that's being created among federal workers across the country. The phone is ringing off the hook in our office here on the Hill and our office in Alexandria. Calls and letters overwhelmingly opposing the shutdown. I've heard from people living in anguish and fear, not knowing where the money's going to come from to pay their tuition, their rent, their groceries, or their health care. We heard yesterday from a disabled veteran who owns a small business dependent on government contracts. He soon has to decide about whether to lay off his employees. I heard from a contractor who doesn't know where the money's going to come from to pay the health care costs. We heard from a couple, both federal employees, both disabled veterans, who don't know how they're going to make the upcoming tuition payments for their children who go to Virginia colleges. I've heard from a single mother saying they don't know where the money's going to come from to feed their children. Trump says the shutdown is about making the country safer, but it doesn't make any sense if you talk to the people who are furloughed right now. You've heard from furloughed FBI agents, air traffic controllers, State Department officials, TSA workers, Department of Homeland Security, Coast Guard, even Customs and Border Patrol, and they all vehemently oppose the shutdown. Keeping these people off the job and making them work unpaid doesn't make us any safer. And anyone with an ounce of sense would say that sacrificing the service of these trained professionals to waste money on a 5th century wall that can be overcome with a ladder that can be crossed is just a terrible trade-off. Trump has tweeted, he's pitched tantrums, and now he's given an address, and nowhere did he give a compelling reason why the government should shut down, nor have the Republicans in Congress. Every day they refuse to end this shutdown and reopen the government worsens this man-made disaster for our region and for the country. This must end. I'm now pleased to introduce my good friend, the distinguished congressman from Maryland's 8th District, Jamie Raskin.
Thank you, Don. Our regional delegation is 100% unified against the Trump shutdown of public services and lockout of federal workers throughout our region. I've called for a rally tonight in downtown Silver Spring at the Silver Spring Civic Building at 7 p.m. I will be joined there at least by Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, Congressman Don Beyer, Senator Chris Van Hollen, and others, I hope, will come and join us to manifest public outrage about the scandalous situation that Donald Trump and GOP leaders have left our people in. I just wanted to give you I've been asking my constituents to send me statements about what's taking place in their work lives and their personal lives because of the Trump shutdown. And I just want to share a couple of things I've gotten over the last 24 hours with you, and I'll be doing some more of this tonight. But I heard from a gentleman in Frederick who's a veteran, like 40% of federal workers. He's an air traffic controller. He's been doing it for 35 years, and he and his wife have 3 kids, and they've been saving up for them to go to college. One is at Frederick Community College, and one's going to Salisbury University, and he says he's going to have to take money out of their college funds and out of his retirement fund in order to pay basic expenses during this period. He's going to have to pay a 10% penalty for taking that money out early, and even if we are able to pay back their salaries, which we have every intention of doing, they're paying penalties on taking money out of the kids' college funds and retirement funds. And is Donald Trump going to replenish their retirement funds? Is Donald Trump going to replenish the kids' college funds? I heard from a couple where both the wife and the husband are federal employees for more than 15 years. We live paycheck to paycheck with our 2 children. writes Jill Larson to me. She says, both my husband and I are furloughed. We have had to forego necessary medical treatment as our insurance deductibles have reset, as well as our health savings. We are strapped for childcare expenses, car payments, car insurance, mortgage, health care, prescriptions, groceries, and other bills. These are our people. President Trump has succeeded in doing what no foreign enemy of the United States has ever done, which is to shut down the government of the United States for several weeks to the disadvantage of our own citizens and our own federal workers. It's an absolutely scandalous situation. So we are calling on the Republican leadership today to pass our legislation, which is just a mirror of what they've already passed, so we can reopen the government and end this scandalous shutdown. I'm going to introduce now our wonderful new colleague from Northern Virginia, Jennifer Wexton. Oh, I'm sorry, then you do David.
I'll get David. Thank you. Thank you. On Sunday, President Trump's message to the hundreds of thousands of federal workers who are going without pay was to make adjustments. Well, making adjustments is not a luxury that many of our nation's public servants have. The men and women who make the choice to pursue a career of public service also often do so understanding that they will make less money than in the private sector. But they answer to the call to serve because they believe in the mission of the federal government and the agencies for which they work. My district, like those of the other metro region members, is home to tens of thousands of federal workers and government contractors. I've heard from hundreds of constituents who are facing financial trouble, who had to return Christmas presents, who are picking up second jobs, who feel like their government and the nation they pledged their careers to serve has betrayed them. Just one example, a married couple who are both furloughed from the Department of Homeland Security. They don't know how they're going to pay their mortgage next month, or even afford their son's preschool. They've requested hardship forbearances on their student loans and are already looking to take out loans from their credit union to make ends meet. But beyond the financial hardships that the family is facing, beyond the added stress and uncertainty, the thing that they took most to heart through this whole process was the feeling that their work didn't matter. Our federal workers and contractors deserve better than to be used as pawns in the president's political game. I call on the president to end the shutdown immediately. And I now would like to pass the microphone to my colleague, Congressman David Trone.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. In 1961, the communists built a wall in Berlin. It wasn't a good idea then. It's not a good idea now. We absolutely do not need a wall for border security. But everybody agrees border security is paramount. We Democrats are committed to better and better border security. But it should be security based on technology. This isn't the 60s. This isn't the wall in China. This is a wall, this is security that can be attained without a wall, security through technology, through drone technology, through scanners on the border, but also for having more people, more workers to process folks at the border. We have to do the right thing at the border and protect it. But just building a wall is clearly not where we need to go. And holding government hostage, it's just not the humanitarian thing to do at all. Our districts in Maryland and Virginia have the largest group of federal workers. But we got to get past the big numbers, 800,000 people out of work, a couple million people affected, subcontractors adversely affected. We need instead to focus on the individuals. The individual folks that go out for a walk on the canal on the Potomac in the morning or a jog, and they can't park their car. They're on the streets. The safety concerns. I think about the prison workers up in Cumberland. Low-paid jobs, union jobs that deserve better pay and better working conditions. But instead, they're not even getting paid. So we're asking them to put their lives at risk every day for low wages, $16 an hour, and not even get a paycheck. So the crisis at the border is manufactured. 2005, 1.2 million people were turned away or apprehended at the border. 1.2 million. Last year, that number was 400,000. Border security has gotten better and better and better. And we're going to continue to make it better. But a wall is not the answer. So let's get America back to work again. President Trump, let's start thinking about people first and not yourself.
Thank you, David. We're now going to hear from the Secretary Treasurer of AFGE, Everett Catley. Everett.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Good morning. It is time, my brothers and sisters, that Mr. President do his job. That job is to represent the whole country, all of America. Americans want the government open. Our members want the government open. And we need to let the president know we need him to get the job done. We're insisting that the Senate take a vote on H.R. 21 and any appropriation bill to get the government open. We insist that that happens. Federal employees are hurting. Those reporting for work without pay are barely making ends meet. Throw in the additional cost of tolls and other fees to get to work, it's getting astronomical. Real families and real bills are being harmed in every way. And we need to hold this leadership accountable. This shutdown is greatly compromising the future of our government. Who want to sign up for a workforce that says to its workers, you can come to work, but guess what? You will not get paid for it. If current federal employees quit, how is the government going to replace them? Who want to come to work for a government that won't pay their employees? There will be absolute outrage if Google or Amazon would lock out 380,000 employees or force 420 to work without being paid. It would be absolutely outrage. Our average member take home $500 a week. A financial uncertainty causes stress. A financial uncertainty causes anxiety. And this shutdown needs to be resolved, and it needs to be resolved quickly and put those employees back to work so that they're able to make ends meet. January the 11th is the first day that federal employees will not receive a paycheck if the shutdown isn't resolved immediately. We're supporting a House Democrat bill to get the government open, and we demand all lawmakers and the president to come to an agreement and get the government open immediately. Well, someone may be asking, well, what are your members saying? We're representing over 700,000 federal employees, and they're saying that they want the government open. They're saying that they want to get back to work. They're saying that we are patriotic employees and we believe in what we're doing, but we cannot afford to do it for free. Our members are being forced not to work. You know, I received an email the other day from one member who was getting married next year. And they had to make a decision if they were going to pay on the venue which they had been reserving, or if they could put back some funds in the event that they didn't get paid. Well, guess what happened? January 11th, they won't get paid. We have a real issue, and we must get this government back open. I heard a congressman talk about some of the agencies that's affected, such as HUD, who work closely with our nation's citizens. The shutdown has brought nearly all programs to a standstill. Department of Transportation, the infrastructure projects which are often in conjunction with city, county, and state government are grounded to a screeching halt. USDA, food grains and security workers that inspect our food is at a standstill. We must get the government back to work. AFG is working with a law firm and has filed a lawsuit alleging that making employees work without pay is a violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. There was a similar lawsuit filed in 2013, and the result of that lawsuit is that we won that lawsuit. We are encouraging everyone to make sure we send a sound to the president. We want the government open. Thank you, my brothers and sisters. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And our final speaker, then we'll open up to questions, is the president of NEFI, Randy Irwin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I want to thank dues-paying members of NEFI IAM. They make it possible for me to be here today. This shutdown isn't funny anymore. It was never funny in the first place, but now it is ruining people's lives. This shutdown isn't funny anymore. 800,000 people across the country, hardworking, middle-class federal employees, have had the carpet ripped out from under them because of this shutdown. It's not right. Their income has been shut off indefinitely until our government is able to be funded and reopened. These are middle-class people. They cannot sustain a loss of their income for days, weeks, months, or years. They can't sustain a loss of their income for any time. It's not funny for them. It is getting very, very real. The president has been out there saying that those who are hurt by this shutdown, don't worry, they're going to make adjustments. What exactly is he talking about? Is he saying they're not going to fill prescriptions that they can't afford anymore? Is he going to say that they're going to start missing payments and ruin their credit? Are they going to turn off the heat in the middle of winter and just tough it out? Those are the kinds of things. That is the predicament that middle-class people are dealing with in this country. Does he not understand it? It's not funny anymore. This shutdown needs to come to an end. They asked him in that same interview just a few days ago, can he relate? He says, yeah, I can relate. Don't tell us that you can relate. Those words don't mean anything. Show us you can relate by ending this shutdown immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you very much. Questions?
Yeah, Charlie Clark, GovExec. Is there a count on how many Republicans, either in House and Senate, might vote to have a veto-proof majority on some of these bills?
I think we're a long way from a veto-proof vote. But as you saw, 7 Republicans joined us last week in voting to reopen the government here in the House. We believe their numbers are the tip of the iceberg, and we believe there'll be a lot more. We've already seen 4 or 5 Republicans in the Senate indicate their desire, their support for our position, reopen government, and then have negotiations as you will. So we think those numbers are going to grow. My colleagues want to come on up. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, this would probably be best for the reps for the federal workers. What are you telling your members as far as whether to file for unemployment, seek part-time work, how to sort of get over this very rough patch?
Randy?
You know, we're keeping them appraised of what's happening. We're day to day, we're letting them know that we're fighting this fight for them. There isn't really a lot that we can do. It's 800,000 people. That's a flood. It's more than any institution can really deal with at one time. So that's the real trouble with it. But yeah, people are just having to do what they can on their own. A lot of them are trying to get little odd jobs. Some are doing things like Uber. Some are going back to photography, doing lots of little things. But that's not really going to address the problem. That's nibbling at the edges. This is a major problem. People don't understand the economic impact of this government shutdown. The last government shutdown in 2013 cost $1.5 billion a day of money, productivity pulled out of the economy. That is a wet blanket on this economy that we don't need right now. It's a huge problem and it needs to stop. What federal employees can do this and that, it's not enough to make a real difference for how big this problem is.
I just want to add that, you know, last night I heard that, well, federal employees can apply for food stamps and do all these things. They've had that opportunity before, but they chose to work for a living. They don't want a handout. They want to go to work. They believe in being good, patriotic Americans, and so therefore we want them to be able to work for a living and not receive a handout when it's not necessary.
I might add, for the first time in my 10-year career here in the Hill, I actually have gotten some calls to my office from employers who feel so bad for federal employees that they're offering to give them piecework or hire them for days at a time to try to help ends meet. Yeah.
If the president went through with these suggestions that he would declare a national emergency and then use emergency powers to shift military funds to build the wall, What do you see as the result of that? Would that mean that the government would reopen quickly while the emergency powers issue went through the courts?
I think there are several scenarios, Bob. That's one of them. Clearly, there are some Republicans who are hoping that's what happens so they get off the hook in terms of the government shutdown. Obviously, declaring a national emergency where one does not exist, declaring a crisis at the border where one does not exist, is going to be subject to legal scrutiny. There are also some Republicans, and Mr. Thornberry here in the House is one of them, who have expressed great skepticism about diverting necessary military funds for that purpose. So it's going to be subject to a challenge, but that may be one way Trump tries to save face and get out of this, the real crisis, which is the government shutdown.
Excuse me, but if he did declare the national emergency, then is the prospect that would lead to the reopening of the government fairly quickly?
What I said was that's one scenario. I don't think it's a guarantee. Do my colleagues want to comment?
No, it would still be up to Trump. He'd have to declare the national emergency and then agree to sign the bills to open it up. But he's clearly not going to have much support even among the Republicans for that strategy.
If this shutdown stretches on, is there obviously this delegation represents more federal workers than anywhere else. At any
Although
point,
it's really important, that's true. But we want to stress, federal employees exist throughout the country. The bulk of federal employees, in fact, exist far beyond the Beltway. And so 80%. So while, yes, we represent a big cluster, and it's very important to the National Capital Region because the capital is located here, we by no means are the only people interested in the fate of federal employees in the Congress.
Congressman Connolly, at what point, is there a point at which you would say to the Democratic leadership, hey, can you just make this end? Would you ever acquiesce, meet the president where he wants to just end this shutdown?
I can only speak for myself. The president created this crisis. We had a clean funding bill pass the Senate, ready to pass the House, and the White House said they'd sign it. He pulled the plug because of 3 or 4 right-wing talking heads who scared him with his own base, and he pulled the plug without any warning to Republican leadership as well as ours. And that's one of the reasons why Mitch McConnell's face is now on milk boxes all over America.
And let me just add, too, that Democratic leadership from the beginning has said that they're willing to look for solutions. We're very much committed to border security. I heard yesterday we spent $40 billion on border security since 2005. But we're so far, when Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, what they have said is there's been absolutely no movement from the White House on any issue. So, Trump says he's I know he didn't write the art of the deal, but I don't think he read it either. There's been absolutely no willingness to come together and create a win-win situation for the people of America.
The administration has been trying to take steps to mitigate the fallout with tax refunds, keeping the parks open somewhere. Do you think that's actually prolonging the shutdown? Is trying to mitigate the pain?
Whenever the Republicans shut down government, and they've done it many times, they always try to minimize the pain so that people don't notice. I can remember in the last big shutdown the Republicans had, I think in 13, the Republicans objected to the Park Service putting up signs saying closed due to government shutdown. Well, there was a government shutdown and they had caused it, but they didn't want the public to have to see that. And so I think the same game is going on now. So let's not interrupt the food stamps now that we think about it. Let's make sure tax refunds are processed, if not other kinds of tax activity at IRS. I think all of those are questionable activities. I think they further degrade morale in the federal workforce, and I don't think the American public is fooled by it. Yeah.
Building off of that, is there any plans in place, any movement to try to help secure funding for the paychecks of some of the security workers, such as TSA border agents?
Look, our Democratic position is we want to reopen government. We can start with one carve-out, and I guarantee you're going to end up with hundreds. And the people that Everett and Randy represent, and we all represent, they all want to be treated with respect equally. And so getting into that, while you can make a case, I think also is, in some ways, the road to perdition. Let's reopen government right now for everybody. Any other question? Yeah.
Question for the law
lawmakers here. There are some members who are declining pay voluntarily, members of Congress. Are you joining that cause? And if so, why?
Let me just, I'm going to answer that. Don Beyer issued a great statement on it. That's an individual choice by a member of Congress, but it's also, frankly, a distraction from the real issue. We're not in the business of adding to the ranks of the unpaid. We're in the business of getting everybody paid fairly. And you know, this question gets asked not only with respect to shutdown, but you know, shouldn't you not be paid if you don't pass a budget? Shouldn't you not be paid if the Dreamer Act isn't passed? And go down your favorite list. And the Constitution mandates it. We're doing our job. We're here trying to reopen government. And we respect individual choices, but frankly, we think that question is a distraction from the main issue in front of us. All right, thank you all so very much for being here today.
You're the only one with my card, so you're going to have to send me an email.
Oh, so good to see you. Bob, good to see you again. Sure.
Oh, I'm right.
Yeah.